Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Tech Leaders Launchpad live stream. If this is your first live stream, I'm Andrew Murphy, the founder and lead trainer at Tech Leaders Launchpad, an online learning platform for technology leaders to learn to do their jobs confidently and effectively. These are the live streams where I share the people with you that I learn from, my mentors, my coaches, the people that make me be better at what I do so they can help you as well. When I started being a leader, there wasn't a lot of resources out there. There weren't books, there weren't websites, there weren't blog posts, and there definitely were not live streams to help become a better leader. And so I started what I do to help you learn to be better. This is a place where we're going to talk about all the skills we need to be a better tech leader, all of the mindsets, experiences, skill sets that help us be a more effective leader and help us support the people under us. I always have guests that I'm really looking forward to chatting to, but this one especially so. With me, I've got Nisha. Nisha, do you want to say hi to the people watching?
Hello, everybody. How are you doing today? It's a lovely
Yeah,
day.
it is 6 p.m. in Melbourne. What time is it and where are you, Nisha?
It's 9 a.m. in Porto, Portugal.
Yeah, wow. We actually first met in person in Porto just under a year ago. It was October last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
and we're going to see each other again in October this year. But I'm coming back.
Yes, it's going to be in October, and
Yeah,
I think it's going to be a very interesting experience as well,
yeah,
because we'll get the chance to hear a lot from you and from a lot of other speakers in the conference. It's going to be really interesting.
yeah. It's looking really, really good. Anyway, before we get into all of that, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about you, Nisha? What's your story? Why are we here talking to you? And why this topic? Why is this topic important to you?
Yeah. So I've got roughly 20 years of experience in the industry. I've worked as a manager for half of my life, half of that those 20 years, and it's a little bit aligned with what your mission is in a sense where when I started as a tech lead, I didn't have any training or notion of what I was getting into. People recognized in me qualities that leadership qualities that would help not only deliver the results of the organization, but also nurture individuals and strengthen teams to achieve those goals. But it really as you manage people, you learn a lot from them, from their special circumstances and from what they go through. And then personally, as you grow in your own life, you also go through a lot of changes that change your outlook and the way you deal with the situations as well. And so this is important for me because if I had someone that would have, when I started, given me insights or food for thought for me to actually think about these subjects in a more objective way, perhaps the way I've handled a lot of situations in the past would have been different and a lot more um, productive and positive. So I guess the idea of this session is really to spill the beans on everything that I've learned so far.
Yeah, I think it's really important as leaders to recognize that when we were an IC, when we were writing code or whatever job we were doing, when you make a mistake and you make a mistake with a computer, the computer doesn't care that you made a mistake. The computer doesn't care if you run the same unit test 100 times and it fails 100 times. And it's not the case when you're a leader. If you make mistakes with people, those people get hurt, and those people feel they're not being listened to, and so it's important that we learn these skills, especially in these circumstances. There's room for making mistakes. We're all human, but we do want to reduce these errors, these bad ways of handling the situations as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that is that a manager or a tech lead that has line management responsibilities, they play a very crucial role in an individual's life, right? I think today we've gone a lot into the corporate world, and we're very driven to, increase the revenue, to disrupt the market, to do everything that, from a number perspective makes sense, and keeps a lot of people happy financially, of course. But it's very important to also, not forget that we're dealing with humans, and that leadership is a very much human exercise where we have to consider people's emotions, and sometimes just handling or mishandling a situation can drive havoc on people's lives unintentionally, right? So I'm not trying to put a lot of weight on managers, but it's just, it's a realization that I came to after a few years on these roles, that it's up to managers to actually make or provide and create an environment and nurture that experience for developers, engineers, QAs, everybody that's around them, to be able to fulfill their duties in the best way possible.
Yeah, we think a lot about this stuff as a leader, and it's important we spend the time focusing on it. I think it's, somebody listening to you might think, "Oh, am I really accountable for this?" And the answer is, well, yes, this is part of leadership. When you put on that mantle of leadership, you become accountable for a whole bunch of things that you were not accountable for previously, and that's just part of the remit. That's part of the mantle of leadership. And it's something that you just have to accept, and support your team through these difficult situations.
And it can be scary, right? And
Mm.
and one of the things that I remember doing when I first became a tech lead was I basically, the head of HR actually had like an open door policy with me, where I would just go in and said, how do you deal with this situation? What's the best way in which I can support the team? And believe me, in the first time, I wasn't perfect at all. I did a lot of mistakes, but I also had to deal with things that I never experienced as a software engineer or as a consultant. I've never ever experienced them. So and I remember that as a software engineer, I didn't observe as much as I started observing when I became a team lead, right? And recurring to others and asking for advice is super important in that beginning, because it helps you think about options, which I think is something that we often forget, is that one situation can have multiple ways of being dealt with, and it really, really depends on what kind of constraints you're in, what kind of environment you're in, what kind of policies your organization has set up, and what kind of relationship you've built with the person as well.
Yeah, yeah. Let's put a pin in that. That's a really
Yeah,
important point I want us to come back to. But the people listening on the live stream might be thinking, okay, what life-changing events are we talking about here? Like which
sure.
things, what are these things we're discussing? We're not going to give you an exhaustive list. I think that would take up the rest of the hour, but just as a sample of some of these
Yeah.
life-changing events.
Yeah. I think life-changing events that I've seen, and the ones that where we should be looking for, are things that force us to reevaluate how we think about life, and force us to adapt to a new reality. So Sample examples of those can be, having a baby, becoming a parent for the first time, which both of us know it's quite challenging. But it could also be something like losing a loved one. It could be miscarriage, having a miscarriage. It could be something like, going through war. I mean, we've seen, war in Ukraine, etc., which have a very big impact on people's lives, and they still carry some people still carry on working. Um, and a lot of people, when they go through these things, they reevaluate their lives in a very profound way, right? Where they reconsider, okay, am I on the right job for me moving forward? Am I What kind of things do I need to support me? Um, do I need to change a career? Do I need a career change? Especially if you're becoming a new parent, and your current work has an incredible pace, you might actually actually reconsider that as well. And it's very important that the role that the manager plays in these situations. I'm not even going to talk about HR, because HR has a very big responsibility in this, in designing policies that support individuals. But the first contact you have is really your manager, so they play a very important part in supporting the individual through this sort of events.
Yeah, I think that that idea of being accountable is important, but it's also important to remember that you're not in this alone as a leader. There are people around you to support you. You've got HR, you've got your manager, you've got people to support you through this as a leader. It's not something you have to tackle alone, and there's always a first. You're always dealing with something for the first time, and that doesn't mean that you have to come up with all the answers yourself. You do have a network of supporters around you. Let's maybe dive into an example, into a situation that's happened either to you or around you, or with your team, that we can kind of talk through how it was handled, and what was good about the way it was handled, and maybe what would change if the circumstance happened again.
Yeah, I have a collection of situations around the same topic. So what I'm going to do is tell you a bit of that story, but enrich it with other tools that I learned
Sure.
on different occasions as well. One of the situations that I had was an individual that became a new parent. Um, they went on a very long maternity leave, 1 year. The organization was going through a very aggressive growth phase in their life cycle, and a lot of it has changed in 1 year. Managers had changed, the way the system was being designed, um, and the coding practices had changed, development practices had changed. There were new tools introduced, and so when that person came back, they came back after a year, and obviously it was almost like starting a new job, because even the people in the team had moved into other teams, and so on. So initially, the person had a very specific role. They were leading a team, and it was their decision that when they were to come back, they wouldn't come into a leadership position, obviously, because it has a lot of other weight. And but the interesting thing was, there was a lot of, oh, but that's not how you do it, or I remember we did this like this, and this is very different. And that kind of created a little bit of friction in the team. And the team lead, who was not a parent, had not it didn't really realize the intricacies of what's going through people's mind, and what really happens when you return to work after an experience like that, biologically, but also mentally and emotionally. um, he was like, how do I deal with this? How, because I know that the team that is established, they know what they're doing. We're all set. But there's still this adjustment that the person that was joining in needed to do, because when you join in, and I think that this is one of the things that managers don't really realize, is that when you start after uh, uh, having a baby, either if you're a man or a woman, it doesn't really matter, because everybody can is entitled to that take that leave. um when they started, the there's a very big gush into, right, I'm now not talking to babies, I'm talking to humans, so I'm going to go and do something meaningful, right, in this time that I'm working. And so what at least it happened to me as well, when I returned to work, like I was really energetic and like super excited for coming back to a part of my life that I identified as normal before. And in the and that is something that is very natural when you have someone starting after a very long time. Obviously it depends on personalities, because some people might have the tendency of, I want to start simple, not complicated, ramp up gradually. But there are other people that are like, no, give it to me. Like I want to dive in and do stuff, right? So it's very important as a manager to be sensitive to that, and actually ask people, what do you need, right? How can I better support you? Because you can be in a situation where you might make assumptions, because you don't really know how that period has been. Like, you don't know how labor was, you don't know what kind of difficulties a person had. There are situations where people are in completely new countries without any support, which was something that happened to me as well. And it's very daunting. So it's very important to actually connect with the person when they start, and kind of align what your expectations and where we are, and kind of also give them a very good view of, you know this is what happened in your absence, and this is how we're now proceeding. So then when they start, they have that context, right? Because that is the thing that kind of changes how the the sequence of events that are going to happen after are going to be.
Let's pick into some of the things you said there. There's this idea of talking to the person and trying to get from them what they need. Like that I think is one of the key messages, and that's something that in my experience, I had somebody who came back from parental leave, and I just made the assumption, because it's the way that I would want to be treated in that situation, that they would want a slow, easy, kind of transition back to work. Like, I'd pick some really easy things for them to
Mm.
do, some really easy tickets that would just really not cause a lot of brain power, because I was thinking they're probably sleep deprived, they're probably focused on their family. Let's just give them some really, really easy stuff to do. And then after about 2 weeks, he said, "Hey, Murph, can I have a chat?" And he said, "I am just going crazy here. I need something to get my teeth into. I've missed this for the past 8 months. I just want to do something complicated." As tiring as it is being a parent, the tasks that you're actually doing are pretty simple. It's change the nappy, it's burp the baby,
Yeah,
feed the
they
baby.
don't exactly. They don't require brain cycles, right? You just do them
Exactly.
automatically. So that was, it's funny that you say that because that is one of the things that I felt as well, was just like my brain is not being exercised enough. And I was like in that period where I was in, and I had other things going on like COVID starting and lockdowns and etc. But it was mainly that. It was the fact that your brain is not being exercised enough, regardless of what you do, and you really crave that that complexity so you can be more engaged. And
Hmm.
one of the things I felt when I came back to work, well, not immediately because I relocated and then started a new job, but it was exactly that, was was having a very uh, having challenges that made my brain tick, that kept me engaged. So then by the end of the day, I would feel like, okay, I've accomplished something. I've moved the needle. I've impacted something. And I feel like a lot of people crave that, but you won't
Yeah.
know unless you actually talk to them and understand what they need. I think as a manager, one of the things that is really important in these situations is also to not just talk to the person, but also create those opportunities so they can be equally engaged. But if for instance they say, I want to be engaged, but I don't want to be in that spectrum where I'm dealing with production incidents
Yeah.
because, I have to take care of my kid and I might not be able to honor that or be in a position where I can honor that because I can control my kid, right? And the rest of the things that are going on with me.
Yeah.
There are certainly a lot of things that you can do within your team to enable others to work better, that is still engaging, where people can still see the impact that they can have on a day-to-day basis, right?
So we're maybe talking about tasks that are complicated and important, but maybe not necessarily urgent and time bound.
Exactly. Yes.
Things that they can get their teeth into, but it doesn't matter if they do it in 2 days or 2 weeks. Like that's
Yeah.
some really good tasks to give people. And another element of what we just talked about is um, this disconnect between the way that we might want to be treated in a situation and the way that they might want to be treated. But sometimes we've never been in that situation. Like I have been incredibly fortunate in my life that I've never been involved in war, and I am incapable of having an understanding of what somebody in that situation wants, needs, and expects. Like how can I lead somebody through that when I just cannot even comprehend what they're going through?
Yeah. I had to actually manage a project, and the team was in Ukraine at the time, and I wasn't equipped for that. Okay, just to be very clear, I don't think anyone is, because even when I was going through the interviews to assemble the team. Um, I found this really great engineer. If he's hearing this, he's absolutely amazing. But he was in a very tough position because he couldn't leave the country. he and the reason for him to be working was mainly, I need a distraction so I can really, you know go through this. uh, the person was completely in survival mode. He had family members that were in areas of the country where the war was very much in flux, and there were no news. We knew about the corridors that were happening, and etc. And when I had my one-on-ones with him, he would say, Nisha, just, you know, I really need you to consider whether you want this, whether you want me in the team, because I might not be here tomorrow, right? And that kind of touched me because you get to that point where you're like, oh shit, sorry, I swore, but this is real. I mean, this is. this is like I'm here safe in my space, never had to deal with this. I mean, if anything, I have a conversation with the police that has stopped me because I was, speeding or something like that. Uh, but this person that you're managing is part of your product, of the project you're responsible for, um, is working for you, is going through this, it's delivering, right? We had meetings where he would say, "Hey, I'm hearing the sirens. I'm going to hide in the corridor because I don't know what's going to happen. If you stop hearing from me, don't panic because it could be that nothing has happened, but I'll let you know." Right? We had situations like that during while that project was going, but we also mitigated these the circumstances of something unfortunate happening to people and etc. Because everybody was aware of everything. The way the system the project was managed was very clear. We had very clear requirements. We had a very clear view of the architecture and where we wanted to go and what we wanted to do. So it was it was still feasible, still doable, and the guy he was absolutely fantastic. He delivered under duress, and but in at the same time he also needed that distraction because it was the thing that was keeping a bit of normalcy in his day to day, despite the circumstances, right? He was in a safe location within the country, but there was still, some things that he couldn't predict or no one could predict, right?
There's a really other angle to this, which I think it's important we discuss, which is this is this situation. It's obviously life threatening for him and challenging incredibly for him, but it must have been challenging for you
Yeah.
emotionally to help
Yeah.
him through this and to manage all of the team and to look after this. Like, how do you look after yourself so you can look after him and your team?
Well, I have to say, I stopped watching the news at that time. Okay, that was probably the best decision I made because every time, because I knew exactly in which location all of the team members were, and every time I heard one of the locations like Odessa or I would just kind of go like, "Oh my God, are they okay?" Not from a the project could be at risk because it wasn't it nothing to do with the project, but more of a I've been talking to this individual who I really care about, even if it's just for a period of time for the duration of the project, but it's still a person, it's still a human that is going through something that he didn't ask for, that probably compromised a lot of the dreams that he had, in and it's very it puts a lot of things into perspective for you. But I had to stop watching the news, and what I focused on were on our one-on-ones and how we could support him, and there were a lot of there was a little bit of because the thing is when you're in this state, in the survival mode state, you're also a little bit edgy, right? So the tiny little things can kind of uh, clip you, put you in a more edgy state. But for me, it was literally, I have to step out of my preconceived ideas or everything that I've learned so far because the only way we're going to get through this as a unit, as a team, is by having a lot of patience, being very honest and authentic in the relationship, being able to really actively listen to how people are reacting to the situation, what they're feeling, and how they're dealing with it as well. And in that in by having those conversations, you also get a little bit of comfort in a way where you've stepped outside. You're still managing, but you kind of step outside that strict. The we've got our deliveries and etc., which is fine. But for that hour, right? It's about humans supporting each other and making sure that they have everything they need to be able to do the job.
Yeah, I just literally can't imagine that. If you're watching and you've got any questions for Nisha or I, please post them in the chat. I want to help as much as we possibly can with anything that's going on. Obviously, don't share personal details, but if you've got a circumstance you want to get some advice on, please post that, and we'll see if we've got time before the end of the live stream. You touched upon an element there, which is obviously what people are going through makes the way that they respond, the way that they react change. That's obviously going to put some stress, that's going to put some impact on the other people in the team. How do you kind of handle those situations where what's happening, this life-changing event to team member A is impacting team member B, C, and D, and you might not necessarily, obviously in a war situation, it's pretty obvious what's going on, but there
Yes.
might be some other personal circumstance that you can't share. Team member A might have just gone through a miscarriage, and you don't want to share that. It's not your place to share that, but team members B, C, and D obviously know that team member A is something's going on.
Yeah.
How do you handle that situation?
Well, I think if you had asked me in the beginning when I became a manager, I would handle it in one way. In the middle, I'll probably handle it in a different way. Today, I would handle it in a very different way as well. And I think, the important thing here is that everybody has the same goal and interest at heart, right? No one is there to, make anyone's life harder. Where we, as a team, we're asked to rise up to a challenge and to work together and collaborate to be able to deliver that, right? So when you have those situations, and obviously you're never going to break confidentiality and name people or explain the situations and etc. But what you want to do is actually in those one-on-ones really work with people and ask them questions that will make them think about the situation itself. So that's one of the strategies you can have. The other thing that you might want to do is when the conflict is happening is just um, trying to remind people that hey, the challenge we're trying to solve here is this. What can we do here? So it's kind of doing like a tiny little reset in the conversation, and but always with empathy. So realizing and acknowledging that you have different point of views, you have different preferences in how you work. You're normally not reacting in this way, and there are things that might be triggering you. But one of the things I've learned recently is that just coming out to the team and saying, hey, I'm going through something, I'm not prepared to talk about it, but just give me the benefit of the doubt here. I'm not myself right now. I'm working through things. Um, and so if I react in a different way, don't take it too hard. I'm just dealing with stuff. It's the thing is, you don't really need to share what's happening with you at all, but if you just do that small thing, which is making people aware that something is up, people will go like, oh, okay, you know, the person has reacted in a way that I wasn't expecting. They're having a tough time, because this is the thing, when we're in conversations, we're thinking about ourselves, a lot of the time, and we forget that, the other person might actually be going through something, or thinking about things in a different way, and sometimes it's just different point of views that are not aligned. But just doing that changes a lot the dynamics, because it allows the team to also provide feedback and say, hey, on this situation, I felt that this, the way you reacted wasn't really great, and I know you're going through something. But if you need to talk or anything, I'm here. And that is how we can show up to each other, as individuals, and say, I understand you're going through something. I wasn't really okay with this situation, that the way we've dealt with this thing, but there is space, because then the person can go away, think about it, and come back and say, hey, you're right, I'm sorry, it wasn't the right thing. And you're still preserving the relationship, but you're dealing with each other in a very authentic way, without actually disclosing the things that are private to you, because you don't really need to. But it gives you that chance to receive feedback and give feedback as well, and preserve that relationship throughout those times.
And as a leader, would you, if you were leading somebody going through a difficult life-changing event, would that be the advice you give them, is to share that with people?
Yeah, I would. Today, after the amount of years I've done this for, yes, that is because it just sets the expectation and raises awareness, and so everything that happens after that, like the domino effect, right? The pieces are going to fall in the right order, rather than, you know, you're thinking that I'm not, considering this or that. And, this is important to me. And it's like, yeah, but, there's something else going on here. It's
Mm.
not just, so it just sets the tone in a very, very, very big way. The other advice I would give you, if I'm allowed, is also to establish boundaries. When you're going through those type of situations, um it's very you kind of need to shift the mindset a little bit sometimes, because you it depends on your upbringing and your baggage, but in some cases you might think, oh, setting up boundaries is actually very selfish, I'm just thinking about myself. But that isn't really the case, right? It's about, in that situation, thinking about, what is it that I need to prioritize? Where are my limits, right? What is it that I can realistically do and I'm okay with? And what is it that I cannot absolutely do? Um, and, and that is, if somebody asks me, that is going to be a definite no, right? Because the thing you need to manage as an individual, and as a manager you also need to support the individual in this way, is help them manage their energy throughout the day and how they show up as well, right? And there's no science here, there's no right or wrong. Everybody's different, but it makes a difference if you have flexibility, which is something that you might decide that, for me as an individual going through this experience, having flexibility, time flexibility, is important, so I can, help someone that I'm looking after, or something like that. But there are things that you might want to say a strict no to, as in, I'm sorry, but I can't really travel because of the situation I'm in, right? Um, and and having that notion that there are things that, and it's not about you saying no to traveling forever. Like, we have this thing that, oh, it's, I'm setting my boundaries. No, it's something that you're doing potentially in a temporary basis until you get yourself organized, that you have to say no to, right? And having that conversation with your manager, and your manager really being supportive of that, is really important, because it changes how your experience is going to be, right? It doesn't mean that you're not engaged. Sorry, you're not um, dedicated to the organization, that you're not interested on what the organization is doing. Quite the opposite. It's about figuring out how best to do all of that while you're still dealing with everything else, right?
Yeah.
It could be just temporarily, and there are other situations where, as someone going through this, you might actually not know what you need and how to deal with it. And in these situations, managers are in a position where they can ask questions that will help them start defining what those boundaries are. And if they're not able, if the person on itself, let's say, is not in that mindset where they would say, no, I cannot do this because of this and that, right? The manager can actually support that, or even a trusted colleague or a confidant can help you with that, right? We have this thing with, when we're going through life-changing events, that we're going through them alone, but it doesn't need to be like that.
Yeah, and again, like we said in the beginning, if you're a leader helping somebody through this and you don't know what questions to ask, you've got a support network as well. You've got HR, you've got your manager, you've got your peer group of leaders. Like just remember that as a leader, that this might be your first time helping somebody through something like this. It's probably not the first time for everybody in your company. There's likely somebody who's helped somebody through a circumstance like this, and they can help you, or they can help you, guide you to the questions that you need to ask. I think there's an important mirror on the stuff you've just been talking about there, which is the boundaries to set as a leader helping somebody. And it can be really, really easy to over invest in somebody emotionally, time wise, and kind of do that to the extent where you support your team, the rest of your team, less, because you're too focused on this one person. That's a really difficult balancing act as well, making sure you give that person as much support as they need without compromising how you're supporting the rest of your team. That's a really difficult balancing act to have.
It is. Yeah, it is. And and this is why I was saying that, if there is a hint of, and you share with the team that, I'm going through something, it kind of helps, because the team then can understand that there is going to be, that at times there will be some unbalance, right? But as a leader, the important thing here is, to carry on having those deep conversations that you have on your one-on-ones with everybody else, making sure that you're still keeping the eye on the ball on obviously on your deliverable, because otherwise, your organization, your managers are going to be questioning, whether what's going on there. But it's important not only to go, it's important to not lose track of everything else that is going on, right? In that period, when you're dealing with that individual that is going through a life-changing event, yes, you might have to spend a little bit more time. You might have to look into other things, like other type of tasks, create other type of opportunities. But things like um, making sure that you're still gauging the health of the team, on a day-to-day basis. That is very, very important, right? And even if people are going through difficult times, right? Things like virtual coffees, team building sessions, um, uh, even company activities, right? those things also help lighten the air and help the individual be transported into outside of their reality for a moment, which makes a huge difference because sometimes we just need to kind of be removed from that context and then have something done with us in a positive way and then have us back.
Yeah, and making sure that those events are optional and inclusive in the way you run them, because
Yeah.
back to your point about the limitations on people's time and energy and focus, for some people, especially introverts, actually engaging in those things, even though they're rewarding, are incredibly emotionally and intellectually
Yes.
draining.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is very true. So in the nature of those activities, it's also important to take that into account. But it has to be a very inclusive thing that caters for all of the situations.
Yeah. We're rapidly getting to the top of the hour, so I have one last question for you.
Okay.
We kind of touched on it a little bit in various points of this discussion, but remote work. This is something that's
Mm,
becoming more and more prevalent. Obviously, you know, uh, being in person helping somebody through something like this is radically different to being
it
remote
is.
helping somebody through this. What tips do you have for people who are leading somebody remote going through these types of situations as opposed to in person? What type of things do we have to think about more? What things do you have to focus on more? What are the challenges with it?
Yeah. I think having managed people physically in the office and remotely, um, i- in some ways the experience of being remote has improved, in other ways has been degraded slightly, right? The number one tip I would have is that the fact that you're is about thinking on the positives and the things you can leverage. So an example, the fact that you're working remotely, right, is is good in a way where the person is in a location that they find safe, that they can open up and share things with you and have these conversations, right, that will lead to a better experience. um, so that's one thing that you have going on, but then there's another thing, which is the other side of it, which is if the person is alone in that place, right, it's very important to think about what's the state of mind, how people are going to react to it, because people, I cry, and I might be okay in the call, but then as soon as I'm done, I might take a moment and cry a little bit, go and grab some air. Like, the fact that you're remote helps the person deal with these situations in a more graceful way that is not that public. But the second thing that I would remind people is that the fact that you're remote doesn't mean that you can't have a physical presence. And what do I mean by this? It actually means that you can actually send things to people's house, right? As a manager, you can send flowers, you can send, um, breakfast delivered at their door. You can get together with your team, or have like a company policy that helps you deal with, support people in this situation. So the fact that you're remote doesn't mean that you can't do something nice for people that will support them. And I'm not talking about like material things. That's sometimes just the thought, and doing small little things can make a difference on people's life and outlook.
I
And
I like that angle of taking a break. I think as a manager as well, dealing with somebody going through this, that's important to remember as well. And if you're dealing with somebody remote who's going through one of these situations, if you're in the sort of job where you're hopping from meeting to meeting to meeting, it's probably a very good idea to make sure you've got a buffer after your meetings with this particular
yeah,
person, because you don't want to be going from that sort of conversation to another one. You need to give yourself the breathing space as
yes,
much as you give them.
Absolutely. I in the middle of my career, I used to kind of just like, okay, this morning I'm just going to do one-on-ones, and it was like one right after the other. And I was by the end of it, I was like, okay, I made it. But it's incredible because you have to preserve your energy and be in that right state of mind because you're working like a machine. So the fact that you're mentioning that is actually something that was if someone had raised that awareness in me before then, it would have been actually really great because if you have 10-15 minutes between those calls, you're catering for, the call just sliding a couple of minutes so you don't have to abruptly finish the call. You're catering for you kind of standing up and taking care of your needs. And you're also, I mean, it depends on the other person, but it also gives the other person the opportunity to do that as well, right? But as a
Yeah.
manager, that is fundamental. So by the end of that morning of one-on-ones or the afternoon, you're not completely floored because guess what? By the end of your day, you still go back to a family or to friends or to your cat or goldfish, whatever that might be. You still have to have the energy to carry on so you don't burn out, right?
Yeah, it's back to that idea of if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after your team. And focusing on your energy, your focus, your emotional well-being is not selfish. It's important. If you don't do that, you cannot support your team. It's everybody forgets this. I forget this in the moment. I've had times when I've burnt myself out helping my team and then
Yeah.
gone, why did I do that? That was dumb. I shouldn't have done that. We are at the top of the hour. That has been an intense 54 minutes. I hope everybody listening, you've gained knowledge from this. I've definitely gained knowledge from this. It's something that we don't talk about as much as we should as an industry. This happens to everybody at some point in their lives. We either have to support somebody through something like this or we go through something like this. So it's great that we're talking about it. Um, all right, let's finish off with looking forward to the future then and the things that are coming up on the horizon. So I my next live stream is I'm having Charity Majors back. She is going to talk about an email she got from somebody asking for her advice, and the subject of that email said, "My boss says we don't need any engineering managers. Is he right?" And we're going to discuss that email and that topic and how you might handle that situation. Charity, being the busy person that she is, we haven't nailed exactly when we're going to do this live stream yet, but we will do that, and it will be posted on LinkedIn, YouTube, wherever you follow me. Speaking of which, if you're following me on YouTube, make sure you press the subscribe button so you get notified. If you're watching on LinkedIn, make sure you follow me. If you don't want to do either of that, but you want to get told anyway, please subscribe to my newsletter, which you can see on the QR code there. Um, we mentioned earlier that we first met in Porto at the NDC Porto conference. We're actually both going there again in October this year. I am so looking forward to that.
Yes, I think it's going to be really interesting. The talk I'm gonna give is going to be about re-entering the workforce, and talking about giving like the parenting edition and how what it looks like um, as a parent joining the workforce. So I'm looking forward for that. It's my hometown, so it's like my home edition as well. And I think it's going to be very, very valuable, not just for managers, but for individuals as well. So I think it's going to be great.
It's definitely going to take you a lot less time to get to the conference center than it's going to take me.
Well, that's what happened. But why did you decide to move to the other side of the world? Come on.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of great things in Australia, but one of the things that's the most frustrating about it is the amount of time it takes to go anywhere other
Yeah,
than Australia. It is
absolutely.
quite frustrating. I think it takes me about 32 and a half hours to go from Melbourne to Porto. Which is going to be intense, especially because I'm running a workshop there this year. I'm running
Oh,
a workshop, a half day workshop on how to become a leader for the first time. So the skills that are important in becoming a leader, the skills like a skills analysis of where you are right now, as well as the number one skill that I think is important, which is communication skills. Everything we've talked about today is communicating, and so I'll go through that. So yeah, if you're in Europe, heavily recommend you come along to NDC Porto. I always say this, please, 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 if you're an attendee and you see one of the speakers walking around, do not worry about coming up to us. Just do it.
yeah,
Like, just do it. We love having a chat. We love talking. We're there to learn as much as you are. We're there to experience it as much as you are. Just because we stood on the stage and talked for 60 minutes doesn't make us special and unique. It just makes us
absolutely.
slightly narcissistic. That's all.
Well, it's about sharing experiences,
Yeah,
right? And we all learn from each other. So definitely, yeah, just walk up to any speaker you see that you have interest talking about something.
yeah.
Because I think everybody values those encounters because everybody learns from it.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, if we've got our heads down at our computers, just like you would respect that for anybody else, maybe give that person a break. But if we're just walking around in the coffee queue or whatever, or having had a lunch, just say hi. It's brilliant. I love
Yeah.
it every single time. All right. Thank you very much, Nisha, for joining me. It's been a brilliant talk. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and I will see you next time on a Tech Leaders Launchpad live stream. See you later, everybody.
Thank you for having me. See ya. Bye.
Very welcome.